mature Christian. So Ken, it is just so good to have you here. Welcome back, and why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself as you dive into this wonderful content today.
Thanks, Chris. Let me share my screen here and get up what I need. Slow processor, so it takes a second. Come on. Milk it along.
There we go.
There we go. So yeah, Ken Smith. I've been an acquaintance with Jim Wilder and Chris and all the Life Model folks since probably about 2003. We met them in Michigan at a conference, and I had actually communicated with Jim for about a year from overseas, just passing ideas on that I was learning from the book Living from the Heart Jesus Gave You, and finding it really beneficial to my personal life as well as different ministries I was involved with. And so I've been trying to apply it in a bunch of nonprofit organizations and schools and different ministries, and more recently applying it to some disciple making and church planning material. And we'll talk about that again a little bit today. So I'm pleased to be able to talk to you and look forward to share. Today's going to be a little bit less teaching and a little bit more doing. So I hope we can encourage you to participate in small little bits and not feel too overwhelmed by doing that with technology. You good to go, Chris, or anything else? Okay.
We are good. I'm excited for today. You've got some good stuff we're going to do.
Yeah. So let me just pray. Lord, thanks for the day, and thanks for everyone that's here, knowing that you've been part of the process and the journey in their life, and we pray that what we do together brings glory to you, and that we as well are encouraged and can go out into our day feeling a little bit more energized and able to be a blessing to others as well. And so thank you, Lord, for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, let me move to my first slide. Last time we talked about 5 stories that I've been using along with people that are doing church planning movements around the world. And in groups that they use, they ask some different questions, and they tie into principles that are in the life model. And so the very first one is about joyfulness, and that joy needs to be the beginning of what we do. And so in our groups, we would go through and start and just ask people, what are they thankful for, and to share a story of what's been good that week, something that they'd want to repeat. And so we share that story, and then we encourage them in what they've shared. But then with each of these stories, we're looking for people to go out into the week and use what they've learned and apply it to other people. So there's 2 ways you could apply a joyful story as you go out into your week. One is to give thanks to God in front of other people and to see what kind of response you get. Now, I did that with one group recently and said, well, you could go say, didn't God give us a wonderful day? And this woman happened to be working in a Jewish day camp. And she said that, and there was like no response from anybody. And so it was like, wow, that was surprising. But, you know, I guess there's places that God has really deafened people's ears and eyes to hear the things of God. And so normally I'll get some type of response, but to get a complete no response, it kind of shocked her. I thought you said I'd get some type of response, but it just goes to prove we can't control what the response is, but we still have the responsibility to speak blessings out to other people. And so when I share these stories, we actually go through a Bible passage beforehand to just look at it. And so with this story, I tend to ask people to look at Psalm 104. And if you know that psalm, it says, enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise, bless his holy name. And so as we approach God, one of the things that he wants us to do as we come into his presence is to give thanks. And so then if we look at Luke 10, as Jesus sent out the disciples in twos to do the ministry that he was doing, he said, when you go to someone's house, speak peace onto the house. And so as you're going in, you're giving a blessing or encouragement to that place. And so that's kind of a passage that's a good reminder that just as when we start relating to God and we enter into a relationship with him, we need to give thanks. When we enter into relationships with other people, we need to give a blessing or encouragement or something to them. And so we have two stories that actually come out of this, the story of what I'm thankful for, and the story of how have I been a blessing to others, how have I used an encouraging word to someone else or a blessing to someone else or peace on what they're doing, and what type of response did we get. And it's in the process of doing that week after week and telling the stories and just being mindful that that's part of how Jesus wants us to live our life, that real discipleship starts happening, and it doesn't box us into thinking that our talk about Christ or Christianity or being disciples is just something on Sunday, but it should be a moment-by-moment thing, and we apply it to our life. So we have those joyful stories. The second story that we talked about last week, shalom stories, those difficult moments where God restored peace to your life. And so it's, what was difficult, what was distressing, that you needed, maybe you forgot that God was with you and were discouraged and started acting out in a certain way, but there was that point where you remembered that God is with you, and it made all the difference. It helped you put things back into perspective, that God is bigger than the circumstance you're in and that he's with you. And so knowing that he's with you can be a powerful way to impact your life, because just his presence or the awareness of his presence impacts us. And so we tell those stories, and it's, as I've been in groups that different groups, depending on how much struggle people have in their life, this can be a very rich time of helping people learn how to share the difficult things and open up. Some people, you tell one story and it goes and it becomes a million different stories because they remember things, and other people have a hard time opening up and talking, but trying to find that balance to help those that want to talk about everything focus in on one thing, and helping others learn to take some steps about identifying the stresses in their life and thinking about God being with them in the midst of that becomes a real valuable learning experience. And then we go out, and so I like to use the Psalm 23:4, which talks about, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for the Lord is with me. And so it's that presence. So as I teach it, I use that passage. But at the same time, then we could use a passage like, with the comfort you've received, comfort others. And so as we tell the story of how we go out in the week, and when we see people in distress, we want to use that as an opportunity to connect them to God and let them know that God is with them in that circumstance as well. And so we want to, maybe it's just, can I pray for you? But in some way help them remember that God is with them, and that God brings distress on us to get our attention sometimes. I was looking in Chronicles the other day and looking at King Ahaz, who did not walk in the ways of David. And it says in 2 Chronicles 28:22, at the time of his distress, King Ahaz himself became more unfaithful to the Lord. And so as I talk in groups, we have this opportunity in distress when God makes his presence known, or that we we're reminded that, oh yeah, this isn't the way he wants me to act, that we have that opportunity to turn and listen so that when we have ears to hear him, we then obey. And if you start looking at that theme throughout Scripture, there's always the theme, hear, O Israel, which really means hear and obey. Or in Revelation, it talks about those that have ears to hear, let them hear. And so it's not just let them hear, but let them hear and obey what he's saying. And so in this case, Ahaz didn't listen to the Lord, but turned away. And so we want to build into our lives the habit of, in that distress, turning to him. And then we want to help other people do that. And so in those moments where we're trying to restore peace, that sense that everything's right and God's in the right perspective in our life, other people, because that's a lot of what other people are looking for, and they're looking for someone to understand them in their distress. The next story that we tell in the groups is helping stories, moments in our life where we need help, and just acknowledging that we can't do everything, and that part of maturity is that God gives us tasks that are bigger than we can handle, and that we need to work with other people, or we need to learn from other people. As we grow older, we can do more and more ourselves, but he's always got more that needs other people to work together and do. And as we think about, we're not just individuals, but communities, we start to get that sense that there's bigger and bigger tasks. I've started working on some projects that are addressing homelessness in the 2 counties we're in. And so there's all kinds of people involved trying to help address those needs, and there's no one person that could do that. And there's government agencies, and there's nonprofit agencies, faith-based agencies, and we all have to work together because it's bigger than any one of us can solve. So sharing the stories of what I need, and then how can the people in the group help. Maybe they can't, maybe they can just pray for it, but we also want to learn how to help other people in need, so that I think of it as the weak helping, the strong helping the weak, but we've got to acknowledge that we have a need, and that's part of the step in maturity as well. So with some of those stories, I like to look at I didn't have time to re-look at the passage, but there's the one that says, with prayer and thanksgiving, make your needs known to God. It's either Ephesians or Philippians, but it's one of those passages that says, just as we talked about, there needs to be thanksgiving that goes along with it, but make your needs known. We don't have because we don't ask, James says. But then on the other side, how have we gone out and looked for other people that have needs, and have we helped? You know, when we see people out in the community, do we offer help? As we're looking to reach out into new communities and make connections, we might go and meet with community leaders and ask, you know, what are some of the needs in the community, or can I pray for you, and just start connecting with them. So in our groups, we look for stories of how have people done that, and then what did God do in those circumstances. Maybe people were turned away, but maybe people were encouraged, and we're looking for that because we're looking for those people that are responsive when we act in the way that Jesus did, which was to offer help to others, to love our neighbor. So then the next story is, as we're learning these things, to go tell others what we're learning and practicing. So all of this storytelling is one way to do that, but we may have just studied a passage or something else that God is particularly impressing on us that we need to obey, we need to put into practice. We want to share that with others because the whole storytelling process helps move it into more permanent memory, and so it's a lesson that we won't have to learn again if we've been able to tell the story. And so when we in the groups do this, it's the time to remember, what did we learn last week? What passage did we look at? What did we learn from it? And what was God impressing upon us that we need to obey? And as we've done that, did we see a difference? Did we see any impact? And so that's the sharing what we're receiving and then we go out into the week and we try and pass that on to others. I think of the passage in Matthew 5:19, where it talks about the greatest in the kingdom. It says those that are greatest in the kingdom will be those that practice my commands and teach others to practice them. And so we have that dual nature there, that it needs to be something that we do, not something that we just hear, but we also then need to encourage others to hear from God and to practice it into their life. And then the last story is the stories of God and his people. And so as I disciple people, we're working through different passages of Scripture, not trying to take a whole lot at a time, but we're going through passages that may be 1 to 10 passages long so that we can share them together. We paraphrase them so that we remember them. We can put them into our own words and share them with one another in the group, and then we start to look at what does it mean and what don't we understand and talk about it. But we then focus on what is it that God's really asking us to do as a result of that passage so that we can make the personal application that he wants us to do. So I think of Psalm 119:11, it talks about, I have hidden your word in my heart. So as we share the story and learn to be able to tell it, we then will have opportunities to go out in the week and share that story with someone else as opportunities come up. You know, there's all kinds of different ways to do that. Some as simple as I'm really encouraged about what God's teaching me, and wait for those that ask, what is that, to share with them. So that's an overview of the 5 stories that we talked about the last time. In the discovery groups, when we do this, sometimes we just use the questions as simple as what's been the best part of your week for the first story, what's been the hardest part for the second, what needs do you have that we can help meet, how did you apply what you were learning last week, how did you share what you learned last week, and as we look at the new passages, what's important for us to know. So let me go on. We talked last time, as someone tells a story, we want to be mindful of 3 different things. One is that we want to stay focused on the storyteller and not change the focus to ourselves. So in terms of our comments, we want to not say, oh, that reminds me about something else, and go off and talk about that. If you just shared a distressing story and then it reminds you of something else that happened to you, the person that just told the story might feel misunderstood, or that, you know, they're not the focus anymore, but yet they're struggling because they're still distressed about what they shared. And so it's important to practice not going off into our own stories, and that's a skill that it takes time as I work with different groups to help remember that we're trying to do these stories for particular purposes and to really build some skills that over time we'll see a difference. We might not notice the difference in one time, but just this past week I had a man that I'm working with say, man, I really appreciate what we've been doing, and I can start to see the difference throughout my week as we've been telling these stories, and the things that I never even thought of during the week now are coming up all the time, and it helps him stay in God's peace and in his presence so much easier and so much quicker when he loses that focus. The next thing that we want to do is make sure that when someone tells something that we validate what they said. Now there may be things that they say at times that we need to not validate if it's an untruth or something else, but if we stick to say looking at how big the feeling is or how important the experience is that they just shared, then we can be pretty safe because we're not agreeing or disagreeing with what they felt, but we're identifying, yes, that seems like it was really important to you, or that really seems like a big thing, or that, you know, you probably never even experienced anything like that in your life before. And we're testing, we're not telling them, but we're asking them, is this true? Is this how big this feeling was or this experience was? And this is especially important with the return to joy stories, the distressing stories. We call them the shalom stories. And the last one is then to make sure that after we've done the validating so that they know that they're understood, we can then bring in a comfort, which is that God is bigger than their story and that he's with them, and that there's hope in that they're not alone in what they're doing, and that no matter how big their issue seems, God is bigger. And so if we tried to tell people that before they felt like we understood how important it was and how big the feeling was, they wouldn't be able to receive it. And so we want to practice that in the groups. And a lot of times these are skills that people don't think about. And so we're intentionally trying to build these 3 different practices and skills, relational skills, in the groups. I have a lot of notes here that are just my notes, so I'm going to just pass on from that. And we're going to spend the rest of the time just telling some of these stories and walking through it. So what would be good would be, I'm just going to start off maybe a story myself. We're going to let maybe Chris can respond to me, but then I'm going to ask for someone in the audience if they want to share what they're thankful for or what's been the best part of their week so far. I know from the attendance list that some of you have done this before, so I might see if you'd be willing to share, but I'm going to look for volunteers first. So I'm thankful that God has, in the last month or so, provided a job for me. It was just about the time the last seminar was that I was finding out about that. And so I'm in a place where God is able to use the gifts that I've accumulated over the years in business and accounting and administration. And so it's neat to see the timing of that coming together. And so I give thanks that he provided a place that I can use my skills. And so that just makes me happy and joyful. So Chris, how would you respond if someone shared that?
Well, Ken, I can hear from your appreciation that you really feel like God has taken care of you and placed you in a place, in a position where you're able to use the gifts and the talents that he's given you. And so this is a very special thing that you've shared with me here. And I can tell that just really makes you feel seen and taken care of by God and appreciative by God for his provision.
Yes, very true. And when I'm working with folks and they're telling their stories, sometimes they don't, as we go on, they introduce the fact they're giving thanks to God. With some people, if they don't have a relationship with God, I might be just asking, what's been the best part of the week? And so bringing in the God focus at the end, that's one of the ways that God takes care of us. It's a way that we can do that in a very gentle way. For those that are believers, we might remind them and say, how would you say that same thing and acknowledge that God is the giver of all those things in your thanks? Because maybe they might have just said, I'm thankful that I have a job now and I can take care of things. So I might challenge someone that's doing that to go back and say, how would you acknowledge God doing that? And so I'm thankful that God has provided a job and the timing worked out in a really special way, and I see his hand in all of that. And those are the types of things that as we go out and tell other people during the week, acknowledge God before them, I could say something like, I'm really thankful for the way God's provided for me, and they might ask, then in what way? And I say, well, he's provided a job and it came at just the right time. And so for those that don't want to respond, I'll go on, but I've acknowledged him in some way, and you get to test that out. Who is hearing and who is rejecting the words of God or even God's name in conversation? Because if we spend all our time with those that want to reject him, we're going to waste a lot of time. But if we speak his name and see who he's drawing to himself, we're going to be more fruitful in some of the things that we do. So, Chris, I don't know if you had any opportunities this week to go out and acknowledge God before someone else or show appreciation to someone else. And, did God show up and do anything in that moment? Did it brighten their day, or did it lead to a conversation?
Yeah, actually, I had a chance just yesterday to speak to a group of counselors, and I noticed as I was sharing a little bit about an upcoming event that we're doing, I made it a point to highlight how much I appreciate the work that they do, because counseling can be really tough work, and I appreciated their impact within the community. And I noticed as I started to highlight the qualities that I appreciated about this particular team, I noticed they started to warm up. Their face started to light up a little bit. They relaxed. I noticed their body just, it was as though they were breathing a little more. And I just have to say it was very meaningful to watch those changes as I started to appreciate them and their work and their hearts and their love for those who are hurting. And so it was very special to be able to share that with them, and just the sense that God was smiling over this group. Was great to be a part of that.
Is there anyone in the audience that wants to try and respond to him, keeping those 3 principles in mind that are on the screen?
All right. Well, I'm going to try to unmute George. I didn't quite get a reply on whether or not he had audio. George, are you there? I can hear noise.
Yeah, here's something there.
You can hear me typing?
Yes.
There we go.
I'll be darned. I didn't know I had a microphone on this. Well, you made a big mistake. I'll never stop now. Hey, I had just started on this walk, and first I wanted to say, oh, wait a minute, you tasked me to, focus on the storyteller.
Yeah, that would be the first violation. You're
It's good practice, George.
Boy, are you going to take a while to get me up to speed? Anyway, Ken, you touched me enough, but I'm very distracted still. I really need what Thrive and Life Model has to offer for connecting with people. But I sense that you have the information I need. So I had asked earlier, do you have a blog site that I can read or follow you more closely with?
I don't at the moment. So I'll give you an email address at the end. So we've lost the first one, so let's move on to the second one. How can we validate what Chris just said? Any thoughts there? George?
I believe that these pieces of information that you just templated with Chris, I'm still trying to get into the box here. Ken, you shared a lot today, and particularly about finding a new spot in life and how things are coming together. And that sounds very cool, and it sounds like it's something that's going to be continuing to help you find that happy place for you. Have you started your happy feet yet?
No, I haven't started my happy feet. So let me give you an example here of validating what Chris said. I know Chris, and you're the type of person that's really encouraged when you can lift other people's spirits and see that impact, bring life to them. And so that was probably a big deal when you saw the impact and were able to do that for others by speaking a word of encouragement. Is that right?
Yes. Thank you.
So that would be an example of validating. So if I went on to the next one, I might say, and that's the kind of thing that God wants to do for us. And so that's really a way that I see God working in you and making you into the image of Jesus. And so, I'd like to see more of that in my life as well. And I know, in fact, after one person shares, we might go on and ask someone else. So since I did have an experience like this at the new job, I have lots of opportunity to talk with the director and ask him why things are certain ways and ask him if maybe there's a better way to do it. And God was speaking to me this week and said, I need to make sure that I affirm him in the things that he is doing, because he's a hard worker, and he's really poured his life into keeping the organization running. And so I just stopped and I told him that. I just want to make sure that I'm not just giving you criticisms and critiques and other ways to do things, but I just want to affirm in you that you really have done a lot here, and you've had a long, steep learning curve to understand the organization, and I appreciate all that you do here. And he appreciated that, and thankfully he said I hadn't gotten to the point of irritating him with all the other questions that I had had. But it came back in the same way that you did, Chris, that it was an affirmation to him, and you could see him lighten up and be more cheerful.
And I just want to jump in and say how valuable this is, Ken, because as we practice this, when you do the validating and the comforting, I must say I suddenly feel seen, heard, valued. It is quite a transformation that happens when you do have that response. So I hope our listeners are really eager to try some of this, because it is a very impactful response there, and the effect that it has on the storyteller.
George did have one more question there in regards to that. With doing the validation and the comfort, do you push the aspects of your body language and facial expressions as well?
Yeah, you would be trying to show in your face that you're engaging in the way they felt with your facial expressions, and ideally when someone's telling a story, you're synchronizing emotionally with them, so when they were joyful, you're feeling the joy, and that you're reflecting that back. And so, as you look at the life model material, we learned that type of communication we can do 6 times a second, so it's really fast, nonverbal communication. And when we're close to one another, there's even brain waves that impact each other that we can't see, that our minds, there's an area of the brain that talks about mirror neurons is what they talk about, and that the other brain matches what's happening. And so, yeah, we want to show genuine expression on our face to what we're saying. If I was grumpy and I said, yeah, you seem like you were really helping people, I don't think Chris would have felt the same way about what I said.
Yeah, definitely not.
But that's a good question. Let's go back to, let me see if I can get to this. Our second story, which was the distressing stories. I'm going to ask Chris, you may have a story of a place that was difficult this week, somewhere where, you lost your peace, or that life seemed a little bit harder, and you needed to take a minute and restore that. So do you have any stories?
Yeah, recently, Ken, I was driving my family on a back road. We were all packed into my minivan. And I noticed as I was driving, this white truck flew by me, passed me on this road, and pulled in front of me and gave me a disturbing hand gesture, and then sped off. And I noticed an initial reaction of shame when I felt this, when I perceived what he did in giving me the hand gesture. I felt a lot of shame, like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Then I felt some anger, and I wanted to defend myself, but I noticed my shalom was gone at that point. And I turned to Jen and I said, dear, let's pray for that man. Because obviously he's not having a good day, because I was going the speed limits. I couldn't figure out why he was so reactive. So right then and there, we started to pray for this man and ask God to kind of give us, Lord, give me eyes to how you see this fellow. And I suddenly felt my body start to relax, my breathing returned, my stomach muscles, which were very tense, also just relaxed, my shoulders relaxed, and I felt that shalom return, and I just felt this peaceful, yet kind of sad for that man. He was just obviously not having a good day, but it restored the shalom for myself, and even for Jen, who was kind of witnessing this whole thing. And we ironically had a little smile on our face at the very end, just feeling seen by God, and felt like we were in a good place after that.
Yeah, it seems that when someone does something that shows their anger or their disgust with me, especially in some of the strongest ways that you can in our culture, it makes us stop and feel shame. What have I done wrong at first?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. But part of that process, it seems like you were able to do is, well, is this something that's true or not, and kind of assess that process and go on from there, and then say, you know, when I think about God, that's not the way He thinks about me. I didn't do that, but maybe I need to bless those that curse me, and that again, it's, you know, it's the way God would treat other people. So it's encouraging to see that you didn't just start amplifying and sending back to Him the same thing that He did to you, because so often that's our reaction. And so it's really encouraging to see that you did that and you're able to model that for your family as well. I know you have I don't know if your young child was in the car.
Yeah, both boys were in the back seat in their little car seats.
Yeah. And how old are they now?
3 and almost 2.
Yeah.
So
they probably didn't understand the hand gestures and all of that, but they got the sense that someone wasn't happy, and you decided this is someone that really is in distress themselves that needs encouragement. So
that's right.
Thank
you.
So can anybody identify some of the elements, those 3 elements in what I was saying? I'll put them back on the screen to remind you. What were some of the things that I said that was reflective of these things?
I had a hand go up earlier and then it went back down, but I'm not sure if they're ready to answer that question or if they had something else to say, but I'm going to try to unmute Marie-France Doucet. Did you have a comment?
I thought we had to practice to validate and to show what God was doing.
Okay.
So you just did it. So
Yeah. So
why don't you do it too?
So what were the things? What were some of the things?
I don't remember everything you said, but I did appreciate that the example that Chris gave about shame and madness we can feel when people misbehave towards us. And it shows us how God's ways of reacting, go close to God, help us to be who we really are. So that was very encouraging.
Yeah.
Good.
Very good. And so we all have stories like that in our lives that we can encourage each other. Did you have any stories this week that was some distress that you returned to God and His peace from?
Are you talking to me or others?
Yeah, for you. Did you
Actually, I have one. So
Okay.
I have to put you in the context. First, I'm French, so sorry for the French.
That's
The
okay.
English. So I had a friend at home, and I had one of my daughter too, and in our bathroom, washroom, she just left wet towels that was wet in her backpack for last night, the night before. And my friend just went to the washroom before I went in. And then I went in the washroom, and it smelled very bad because of the towel. And I got frustrated because this kid has this bad habit of not hanging her towel on the line. And since I'm listening to the teaching from the time I came back from the States this summer I was at Tribe, I just tried to look for what the Lord has to tell me. And on the toilet, we just have this light box. There's a Snoopy laughing ha 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 on it. And then it made me think that my daughter has other qualities that are so precious, and I could take this towel out for today, and that was okay. And it brought back my peace because I could see my other aspect of my daughter.
Yeah.
And I went back to my friend and talked to her about the towel and the smell, but I was peaceful.
Yeah.
Because I was shamed because of the smell in the bathroom too.
Yeah. And part of validating is helping someone identify what the feeling is as well. And so, you said you were frustrated, and oftentimes there's disgust that's there. And when we see immaturity in others, when we think that they should be able to do something, disgust shows up. And so I can identify, when you're dealing with others, children, that disgust shows up, and you want to jump, and you get frustrated. So I could feel your frustration really. But like you, I think God does the same thing, in that He says, I'm not happy with these things. I'm not happy when people sin, but His attitude is to love them and to find a gentler way to deal with things. And so I see that, yeah, when you step back and had that bigger perspective, that God really used it. You probably spoke words that could be heard as opposed to just angry words or words of disgust that might not have been heard if that's the first thing you said to people.
Well done.
Yeah, I felt seen by God, and things were, I saw the bigger picture of the situation.
That's great.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about anybody else? Did anyone else experience some distress this week where they lost their peace and something happened that caused them to turn and listen and say, yeah, I need to do something different here. I need to remember God in this moment.
We'd love to hear. We have about 5 minutes. We'd love to hear another story or two.
The other story that someone could share is whether that happened, or did you have a chance, anybody, this goes out to you too, Chris, a chance to see someone else in distress and to help them to remember God in that moment and encourage them, pray for them, or something else.
Looks like Kelly Ann has her hand up. Kelly, are you there? Kelly? I heard a little static for a second.
Yeah.
Maybe
Sorry,
she's trying to
Kelly,
get
we're not
her.
hearing you.
Yeah. She did type in a question earlier that everyone else has been typing in as well, and that is, can you share the copies of your PowerPoint?
We can find a way to do that. What I'll do right now is put up maybe the simplest way.
Your email, maybe?
Put up my email there at the bottom that you can contact me with, and I can send you a copy of that.
And Kelly, I still have you unmuted if you get that figured out, or you can type a story in and I'll be happy to read it.
Maybe, Denny, is there some other questions that are out there that you want to read, and we'll see if we can answer them. If someone else doesn't have a story they want to share, since we haven't done any questions yet, and we want to make the most use of our time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had like 4 people asking for your PowerPoints, so that's good.
Okay.
George says he has a question about another person's rage. Can I unmute him for that? Actually,
Sure.
You can unmute yourself, George. I still have you unmuted from my end.
Thanks for opening up. Last week, I had a new friend. He's
Now let's just make sure as well, George, that we're not sharing anything that's breaking any confidence, and that you're guarded in terms of that, in terms of who you're talking about. So
Thank you.
set that as a parameter here, since this is a public.
This person is not saved, does not have a relationship with God yet. And how would I use these same things without trying to bring it back to validating through God's perspective of what happened? Or should I go ahead and just say, this is how I think God would have perceived your frustration in that time?
So he's angry about something?
I would say it ballistic. He went ballistic.
Uh-huh.
He was totally consumed in the anger and the rage, and I was trying to talk him down and basically just distract him from it. And I even have been exposed to enough of this to say, what are some happy times? We need to get away from this toxic moment where you're burning adrenaline at such a rate that we can't get anywhere other than this rage. And he's not saved yet, and so I'm asking, how can we use this without ending up in trying to reinterpret how God viewed the situation?
Yeah, sometimes you can distract somebody and move on and just help get them off the focus, but sometimes people
For the microphone.
bring their rage out
See,
more
now I'm talking, not them.
because they don't feel understood. And so even just the statement, this seems like a really big deal to you, that validating part. You perceive something's not right, and this is
Can you hear
really
me?
important to you,
Right,
isn't it?
can you, what, okay.
Got some other microphones going on in the background there. But does that make sense to you, George, that by allowing him to know
Yes.
that you hear, but you're not agreeing per se what he's angry about, but you're saying this is really important to you, that something's not right, and you really have a sense that something's got to be done about this, don't you?
And I
Just
believe
saying that sometimes will help deflate the person. They don't feel like they have to express the anger all the more because they don't feel understood. You know, it's like when you speak to someone in a foreign language, the first response is when they don't understand you because it's a foreign language is to speak to them louder, which has no impact if you don't know the language in the first place. But that's what we do. And so someone that's expressing anger wants to know that we see that it's a big deal to them. And then we come alongside and then we try and help them put that into perspective, the bigger story, the comfort. What's the bigger story here? What's the bigger value? You know, someone could be upset about something. I heard someone today, and it was about the way someone handled a meeting. And, you know, the person put it in the bigger perspective in the end herself. She said, yeah, but this is someone that's young, that's learning how to be a leader. And so you expect him to at times not get it right, and that we need to be patient with someone like that. And so finding whatever the bigger perspective is that second step. But you always have to make sure that they understand what it is in the first place, that whatever they're expressing. If it's anger, you're really angry about that. There may be other emotions that you can help identify for them and say, this is really important to you, isn't it? Just asking that question will do it.
Well, I want to jump in. Thank you, George, for that question. I want to, again, remind everybody, as you can see Ken's email address right now. It's joystarter@live.com. Is that live.com? Joystarter@live.com. I'm going to switch screens here just to give everybody a few resources. Ken, we just have to have you back again as your schedule allows, because there's so much here that I feel like we're barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, I think we had some good interaction today, so thank you for having me, and I look forward to coming back sometime.
Well, thank you for being with us. And I just want to throw out a few resources for people. One of the resources Jen and I created to go with the Thrive training that we do are 52 weeks of exercises. And while we don't have all the excellent stories that Ken has shared with us today, we do have some of the stories in these skill guides. And so if you're interested, this is one very practical way that you and a bonded partner, a friend, a spouse can actually do more to learn and use these stories. So feel free to check some of those out at thrivetoday.org. And just want to remind people, I'm really looking for those pastors who really want to be a part of a smaller group for troubleshooting, as well as practice some of the training. While we love this forum, this is a bigger net to reach people and to get information out there to you. It's also not the kind of forum that some of you are going to want to share more of your personal struggles and get some life model application. So if you're interested in a smaller group of probably 6 to 8 people, do let me know. You can email me at thrivingtoday@yahoo.com. One of the exciting upcoming opportunities that we have, we only do one track for a year. And the one for this year is called Joy Starts Here. And we're looking at how to apply joy in churches and families and schools. Not just apply joy, but how do I start joy? As I started out our time today, when those joy levels drop, you can safely predict there's going to be a lot of problems relationally in so many ways. And so what we're going to do for the Joy Starts Here event is take a day to really dig into how do I start joy in my church? What would that look like? And pastors, I really would want to see you here because no one has more influence in a church than the pastor, and you're in the ideal position to start joy and to train your community how to be joy starters. And then families, how do I start joy? You know, I've got young children. This is a topic I'm very much interested in because I want joy to be the atmosphere in my home and in my marriage. And for schools, those of you who are in any way connected with education or have children in schools, this would be another must-hear topic. So by all means, learn more about it at our website, thrivetoday.org. We've got more Pastors Weekly events on the calendar for September. So you can learn more about the dates and topics and presenters also at thrivetoday.org. And again, I want to get Ken back here, so we're going to look at making that happen in the future. There's so much good stuff here. We do have a Joy Starter blog. My friend and colleague Carol Brown is helping me with, and you can hear a lot of more information of what we're introducing in these Joy Streams. So check us out at joystarters.com. And of course, there's always the Jesus in Mind Talks with Dr. Jim Wilder, who unpacks this information. Where do you see this stuff in Scripture? What does neuroscience and brain science have to say about this? How do I do this at a deeper level for my family and my community? Learn more about those Jim Talks at lifemodel.org. Check out our new website, joystartshere.com. There's just lots of good information there. And Ed Corey is also applying training communities how to learn these skills. So if you're not already familiar with the Thriving Recover Your Life program, check it out. It's worth it. It's great. And Ed also does joy streams that are much more in-depth, and I highly recommend you take a look at what Ed is up to. And we've had David Tackle here as well, who's created a really neat module for the Thriving Recover Your Life program. You can learn more about that. But for the sake of time, I must let you go. I want to thank you for being here. And again, thank you, Ken, for all the good stuff that you've shared. Denny, thank you for making this happen. And may the Lord bless all of you today as you go out and start telling your stories and start your joy today. So bless you. Thank you for being here.